with your host, Jaden Miller.
Good day, and thank you for joining me on my podcast, Think About It with Jaden Miller. Please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. Check out my website at www.jadenmiller.com, JAYDENMILLER.com. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Spreaker, Google Podcast, Castbox, iHeartRadio, and so many more. So it is good to be back. I have not done a podcast since last year, October. Yep. I might as well just be upfront and admit to that. I don't want to say that I've been too busy. I think I've just been reassessing, just taking in life and making sure that other areas of my life have been taken care of and fulfilled. And so I have been negligent to those of you that listen, and I apologize. However, I really have been trying to find the right niche when it comes to podcasting, and I just never felt that I came to the right conclusion as to which direction I wanted this to go. And so I made a decision after speaking to my wonderful wife the other day, and I'm really just going to try and deal with issues that happened today and maybe provide a perspective because I may be able to provide a perspective from a government standpoint, maybe one from law enforcement, since I'm a former law enforcement official, and then from educational standpoint, since I am an assistant principal at a school. So I think maybe I'll just continue to try to do that which I was doing, but trying to be a little bit more consistent. Of course, one of the aims in podcasting is to build an audience. And so I do realize that you cannot build an audience if you do not continue to provide good information to the audience. And so I'm going to strive to continue to do that. So thank you guys for listening and coming back and checking out my podcast. Today is January 28th, 2023. And a lot is going on, especially with the release of the Tyre Nichols video on yesterday. And so I guess what I want to do is just maybe talk about that a little bit. Maybe that'll be the focus of what I talk about today, but I guess what I want to do is I want to connect that to this whole issue of being black and being black and dealing with the police, because I am black and I have been the police. So I just want to kind of talk about that a little bit, but I really feel bad for Tyre Nichols' family. Here's a young man, 29 years old, in Memphis, Tennessee, that was the victim of an extremely violent arrest. And not only just violent, but just totally unnecessary. Okay? It did not have to happen. And we really still don't know what precipitated this incident from occurring. It's been almost 3 weeks since the traffic stop in Memphis led to this violent arrest. And then after the violent arrest, 3 days later, his death, Tyre Nichols. He was hospitalized after he was pulled over on January 7th. 5 Memphis Police Department officers, who also are black, were fired after an internal investigation and are facing criminal charges, including second-degree murder. And those murder charges were announced just yesterday on Friday. there are some quick key questions that remain unanswered as the nation waited for police to release the footage, which they did yesterday. Let's talk a little bit about the police confrontation. On January 7th, around 8:30 p.m., Memphis officers pulled over a vehicle for suspected reckless driving, according to a statement from Memphis police. A confrontation occurred between officers and the vehicle's driver, later identified as Nichols, who then fled on foot, according to Memphis police. Officers apprehended him, and another confrontation occurred, resulting in Nichols' arrest, police said. The incident happened a few blocks away from his home, and Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis says that they looked at cameras. They've looked at body-worn cameras. Even if something occurred prior to this, meaning the stop, they've looked but have been unable to substantiate it at that time. She went on to say that, quote, "We've taken a pretty extensive look to determine what the probable cause was, and we have not been able to substantiate that," Chief Davis said. She went on to say that it doesn't mean that something didn't happen, but there is no proof. All right. Also unclear are who was involved in the initial police encounter, how far Nichols fled on foot, how officers apprehended him, how long these confrontations lasted, or why officers felt compelled to confront Nichols twice. Well, if we watch the video, we know that there was the initial traffic stop and the police pulled him out of his vehicle. There was some physical interaction between the officers and Mr. Nichols. As I viewed the video, it certainly does not appear that Mr. Nichols was trying to fight the police officers or anything like that. In actuality, he was really attempting to be compliant. And so after this confrontation, they attempted to tase him. He was able to get up and then was able to run away. So that's the second confrontation that they had, which is the one that has a lot more physical interaction. Beyond police body camera footage, police looked at surveillance cameras around the city, at businesses, anything that could help paint a picture about what happened prior to the traffic stop. After the officers stopped Nichols' car, there is a physical interaction, as I mentioned, because they are trying to get him out of the car. They still don't know what the original reason for the stop is. So if you listen to the audio, the police don't really say. But then Chief Davis went on to say yesterday that from the beginning of the encounter, the officers were riled up. She said that the escalation was already at a high level. The nature of the traffic stop was very aggressive with loud communication, and it escalated from there, Chief Davis said. She went on to say that during the initial altercation involving several officers, pepper spray was deployed and Nichols ran. Nichols got away, but the officers found him again at another location. And at that point, there was an amount of aggression that is unexplainable. I can probably explain that for you. So Nichols in the first encounter is trying to be compliant, but he's having a hard time being compliant. Let me explain that to you. So you have 5 police officers that are yelling at you, screaming at you, and involved in a physical altercation with you. Okay? When you have 5 people yelling at you, it is very, very difficult to understand what they're saying and to do whatever they want you to do. That's why police officers are trained that there should be one person to give commands, okay? One, because you can follow the commands of one person. It is hard when you're having 5 people yelling at you, okay? And yelling at you in an emotional kind of way. All right. So that's part of the problem there. Okay. Then the second part to that is that while the police officers are trying to restrain him, then they also determine that they want to tase him, to use a taser. Okay. Well, Mr. Nichols is somehow or another able to get up and he runs from them. Now, for someone that's been in law enforcement like I have, that's pretty embarrassing, okay? So here you are, you're supposed to have control over this individual, which is another thing that police officers are taught to do, and they don't. He gets up and he runs away. That could be bad on a number of accounts. Okay, let's say that Mr. Nichols was a bad guy, and from all accounts, he was not. Okay, let's say that he was some felon or something. He got up and ran away and then committed another crime. The police officers are supposed to restrain him, okay? And they didn't. So that's embarrassment, okay? So now the guy just runs away from them, okay? So now the police are really upset, okay, when they catch him the next time, all right? So that hopefully explains to you, why there is more, a higher amount of aggression. Now they've got to chase this guy down, okay? They were not happy about that, okay? During this second altercation, Police Chief Davis said that she heard him call out for his mom, and Chief Davis said that there was just the disregard for humanity. She went on to say that that's what really pulls at your heartstrings and makes you wonder, why was a sense of care and concern for this individual just absent from the situation by all who went to the scene? There then wasn't an elapsed period of time before getting medical help for Nichols after he was injured during the traffic stop by Memphis police officers. After some period of time of waiting around afterward, he was taken away by an ambulance. Now, so what happens is that after this physical altercation, I'm going to explain the physical altercation in a second, the officers drag him on the ground to a vehicle, and they just sit him up. All right. So now they sit him up after this. What you see on the video is officers kicking him. One officer, it appears, kicked him so hard that he's now limping around after he kicked him. Okay. There are several punches to the face. I mean, cold cocking this guy. All right. Then somebody comes up with a baton and is just striking him multiple times. Somebody is on top of Mr. Nichols. There are probably blows, other types of physical stuff going on that we can't even see. All right. Or weren't in the videos, So that's what makes this a lot more heinous, as some people have called it. On January 10th, 3 days after the stop, Nichols died due to injuries sustained in the use of force incident with officers. All right. He suffered extensive bleeding caused by a severe beating, according to a preliminary results of an autopsy commissioned by Mr. Nichols' family. All right. After the internal investigation, Memphis police identified and fired 5 officers. All right. And they were fired for failing in their excessive use of force, duty to intervene, and duty to render aid. All right. When it comes to excessive use of force, that's always debatable. And this is the reason why often police officers win in court in situations like this, because there's this standard called reasonable. And usually juries, the citizens, usually will give that to the police officer, meaning that, police officers have a hard job to do, and it's hard to determine what's reasonable for one person and what's not reasonable for someone else. But they have a really hard time will have a really hard time in court when it comes to duty to intervene and duty to render aid. Okay. When I was in the police academy, it was drummed into my head: render aid to the injured. Okay. Render aid to the injured. You have got to do that. You can be involved in a situation where you're fighting with the suspect or something like that. You're able to take that person into custody. But if that person is injured, you have to stop the emotional part of you that's, happy that this person is injured or what have you. And remember that there's this professional part and that there's this human part, which is render aid to the injured. And that did not happen. You can see it clearly. All right. And then there's this relatively new concept in policing called duty to intervene. Now, I say that, trepidatiously, because, duty to intervene is just something that we should do anyway. But if you don't understand police subculture, when officers are involved in a physical interaction, even though it may not be within department policy, the force may be excessive. The blue code of silence, the blue wall of silence says that you don't intervene. Okay. There's a situation not maybe last year. I think it happened in 2021, but the sergeant wasn't arrested until July of 2022, just last year. There's an individual that was in a squad car. The sergeant came on the scene, and the sergeant was getting very physical with someone who's already taken into custody. A female officer grabbed the sergeant by his belt from behind to pull him away because she felt that he was doing a little bit too much. Okay. Well, as soon as she did that, the sergeant turned around and grabbed the female officer by the neck and threatened her and told her, "I'll see you in a little bit." Okay. That was probably more of administrative threat coming from a sergeant to his subordinate officer as opposed to another physical one, because I'm sure he at some point realizes that there's a body cam on him. So this whole concept of, physical interactions and stuff like that, these things happen. This whole thing about duty to intervene, these things happen. So this female officer was intervening and the sergeant didn't like that. So again, that goes against that blue wall of silence, which some people like to think does not exist, but does. And so that's where the officers are going to have this problem, okay? The duty to intervene and duty to render aid, all right? The body cam images, the video is damning enough, but we've seen there's happened many times in our history, this country's history, where there's been video which appears to be excessive, but a jury has come back to say that it met a reasonable standard. And I can think of the Rodney King incident situation right off the top of my head. That was back in 1991. Rodney King in Los Angeles was chased in a vehicle, caught by police, and there was a physical altercation out on the street. There was an individual that caught it on camera, but those officers initially were acquitted. So, that's why I say you can have video and audio recordings of an incident, but a jury may see it differently, okay? Especially if the police officers are able to give a very, very good defense for their actions, all right? But there's always a presumption of innocence, okay? And I think in this country, sometimes we forget that. We forget that people in this country are innocent until proven guilty. We have gotten so far away from that. And part of that is just human nature. Okay. If we see or hear something, especially if it goes against the norm, we already assess a judgment to it. We do that. That's a human thing. Okay. So if we see someone and it appears to us that they committed a crime, we automatically go there. But we fail to realize that there may have been something that happened prior to that. And then what we saw looks like a crime, but what actually happened is not. Okay. I'll give you an example from myself. All right. I was in Walmart not long ago. And, I was doing the self-checkout. And there's some lady, she's a worker there, She does not see me scan an item and put it in my bag. So she comes over to me and she says, "Sir, you did not scan that item." And so here is someone that's already have a judgment against me because she didn't see that the part where I scanned it. So I looked at her and I said, first of all, I felt offended, but I looked at her and said, "Yes, I did scan this." And I pointed to the register, the little, it pops up what you did. And she looked at it and she looked very embarrassed. Okay. And then she says, "Oh, I didn't see that." And I said, "Yeah, I know you didn't." Okay. "I know you didn't see it." Okay. That's why that's a good example as to why there should be this presumption of innocence, because we don't see everything. We are human. Okay. So what we assume may not even be what actually happened. All right. I am not saying that in the Nichols case, because we've seen quite a bit. Okay. I am saying that even still, they should be given a presumption of innocence. And that has to be balanced with the fact that it is so upsetting that Tyre Nichols had to die on that night and for the circumstances for which, it happened. My understanding is that he was a father, a very, very good son. He was employed by FedEx. And so we have some answers to some things, but we don't have the answer to a whole lot of other things. And I think that main question is, why was he stopped in the first place? And why were the officers so upset? Especially if it was a traffic encounter. Okay. Sometimes we as human beings can get upset over the smallest, littlest things. Okay. And when you become a police officer, sometimes your sensitivity level goes way up, okay? Because you can be offended so easily, all right? People don't respect me. People don't respect the police. Don't you know I am an authority? It's all of those things. And so I have no idea what Tyre Nichols did. But it seems to me that whatever he did not rise to the level of the abuse that he suffered under the hands of these 5 Memphis police officers. All right. Tyre Nichols was the baby of his family. He was the youngest of 4 children, and he loved being a father to his son. His mother says that he was a good boy who spent his Sundays doing laundry and getting ready for the week. He moved to Memphis just before COVID-19 happened and got stuck there when things shut down. He worked the second shift at FedEx, as I mentioned, and he also enjoyed photography and skateboarding, something that he had been doing since he was 6 years old. He had Crohn's disease, which is a digestive issue, and so for someone to be 6'3" tall, he was rather slim at 140 to 145 pounds. All right. Again, very, very tragic situation. But let's bring in this issue of Black police officers and the Black community. All right. Well, there's a VIP barbershop that's less than a mile away from where Tyre Nichols was attacked by those Memphis police officers. And there's the shop's owner named PJ, and he described the moment he realized that Tyre Nichols was from that community. He recognized him as a quiet young man who would skate through his shop's parking lot. PJ said that he would ride his skateboard with headphones on, just coasting and minding his business. He never bothered anyone. As PJ spoke about Mr. Nichols, his violent death, and the video of his beating, the barbershop's crowd nodded in agreement that it was a shame and embarrassing. adding that it's painful to add yet another name to the long list of unarmed black men killed by the police. More difficult to discuss, perhaps, was the race of the police officers themselves. All of them were black as well. And then PJ said that he heard that a couple of them were just standing around looking instead of saying, hey, man, don't do that. Stop. You're just as guilty if you just stand there and let it happen, according to PJ. PJ said that it makes Mr. Nichols' death feel different. You know, most of the cases that we've heard about in the United States have involved white police officers. And we know the names, Rodney King and Michael Brown and George Floyd. You know, we've heard those names and so many others. It seems different, and we just have to be honest with ourselves as a nation. It seems different when it's white police officers or even, you know, maybe Latino or Asian, you know, against a black victim, as opposed to when they are black police officers and then there's a black victim. Okay. But experts on race and policing say that the involvement of black officers in Mr. Nichols' death is unsurprising. And that's because of years and years of indoctrination, feeling that black lives, regardless of who you are, whether you're black or not, don't matter. Okay? That, you know, black people perpetrate violence and there's these stereotypes of us as inherently dangerous and criminal. And so policing in this country is focused on control and subordination and violence, regardless of the race of the officer, because society views black people as dangerous and criminal. So even when you have black people in the position of law enforcement, that doesn't mean that that proposition goes away. All right. So we do know that there is more anti-black bias among white officers than black officers, but we also know that black people and black officers have anti-black bias too. You know, if you even go back in history, you know, sometimes we've watched movies or read and, you know, it seems like there's a slave, there's a plantation owner, you know, and then that plantation owner, of course, who of course was white, would have overseers of the plantation who, you know, were white. And then if there were runaway slaves or slaves that weren't acting appropriately, then the overseer would take out, you know, punishment on them. Well, sometimes we fail to remember or realize that often the white overseer would employ one of the black slaves to eke out the punishment so that they didn't have to get their hands dirty, as opposed to one of the white overseers doing it. When there were slave patrols out to bring back runaway slaves, members of the slave patrol weren't just white overseers or white people, white men. They were black ones too, that were slaves, that were under the control of their white slave masters or overseers, but had a duty that they had to do. Same thing with policing. You know, people can see it that same way. We have this system, you know, that is founded to protect white people. Yet there are black people that are within the system, some in leadership positions, some are just the rank and file, and that yet they perpetuate this, you know, systematic racism, because officers will judge a person off of a look. Because you've been trained, if they look this way, they're bad. And so until Americans take a closer look at how officers are taught, these tragic incidents of police brutality will continue to happen. I mean, there have been many, many studies. Hey, if we look back at just studies from school, you know, and again, this is the indoctrination. There's this whole thing about white supremacy and, you know, we've been taught white people are better. And so, you know, years ago when there was a choice between a black doll and a white doll, the black kids would choose the white doll, and they would choose the white doll because in their minds, what they see, even at a young age, and what they hear is that when you're white, you're right. You get better things when you're white. If it was back in, the Jim Crow area, if you were white, you got to sit at the front of the bus. If you're white, you got to sit in the nicer restaurants. If you were white, you got to use the better public accommodations, whether it be hotels or sinks or water fountains or what have you. And not to mention schools. I mean, black kids would have to walk past the really, really nice white schools in order to get to the one-room shack black schools. So when you've seen all of that, okay, whether your life is short or whether your life is long, that perpetuates that belief in white supremacy, that white is right. And you carry that with you into professions. And so when you see a dark-skinned black man that's 6'3", automatically there can be this assumption that this person is a wrongdoer, is a criminal, is up to no good. That is something that we as black people carry with us every single day. Okay. Always this notion. Okay. And let me not say all black people, but a lot of black people do, that, I can have the highest levels of education. Okay. But there's always someone there that questions my judgment. Okay. Feel that all the time, even in my current position. Feel that all the time, that people question when I say something. But if there's someone in my position, higher or lower, that has less experience and less education than I do, then they are seen as having a much better outlook on a situation. I deal with that every day. And so imagine that being in these other positions. Okay. You have that going on with you every single day. All right. So it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. My hope always is that we as a nation, that people in law enforcement, that human beings in general will learn from incidents like this. Because if we don't, then Tyre Nichols' death is in vain. Okay. All right. It's really a shame that people have to die for change to come. The city of Memphis has done an excellent job in quickly releasing the video, quickly having an internal investigation, and then ultimately charging these officers, because this usually does not happen this quickly. Okay. Usually what will happen is police departments, city leaders, will rally around each other to find a way to denigrate the victim, okay, to make that person look bad. For example, to make it seem as though, here, we can actually even look at the George Floyd situation. You could make, because he had a criminal record, okay, then this person must not be a nice person. He must be a bad person. Well, at that date and at that time, he was not involved in any criminal activity, okay? All right. But again, the assumption is when the person is black and they have a criminal record, okay, then that person does not get the benefit of the doubt. They are already guilty. But if you're white and you have an extensive criminal record, which a lot of white people do, okay, that are in positions of authority, yes, it's true, but yet they don't get the same lens. They don't get seen through the same lens. Okay. And that's the frustrating thing to people of color. So again, it is my hope that police departments throughout the nation, that people in authority will take a look at this situation, and that there be change in terms of how we view one another. Okay. See, it's one thing to want the police to change, but the police are a microcosm of the larger society. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that the communities across the United States want the police. Okay. They do. And I would beckon to say that if this was an incident with someone who had a gun, who had assaulted several people, and the police were using this type of force against him, that not very many people would bat an eye. Okay, some would, of course, but a lot of people wouldn't. Okay, so it's situational. All right. it seems to me that we as a nation need to really try our best to start moving away from this whole concept of what a person looks like and what color skin they have. Okay, because it's always screwed us over as a country. It has never been good for us. And in 2023, we still don't realize this. Okay, from the founding of this country, okay, to now, we have been involved in racial turmoil since the very beginning. Okay, I mean, since the Declaration of Independence, since the fighting of the Revolutionary War, we have been embroiled, all right, in this negative racial tension. Okay, whether it be blacks, whether it be Native Americans, whomever. Okay, we have been embroiled in this racial tension, this turmoil since the founding of this country, and it has not let up. So I think what needs to happen is there needs to be less, trying to determine, what trainings need to be worked out or changed for police officers, and that more of the funding and the training needs to be towards how are we as a nation going to help turn the tide and stop looking at people for the color of their skin and start looking at them for the content of their character. Someone very, very important said that once. All right. Don't forget, check out my website at www.jadenmiller.com. Please like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and like, comment, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on Amazon, Podvine, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Apple Podcast, and of course, Spotify. I look forward to rapping with you guys during the next episode. Yes, I will keep them consistent. All right, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Think About It with Jaden Miller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, and like and follow on your favorite podcast platform.